It took 25 years to build the marriage. It took one answer to break it open. Not a lie, not an accusation, not a secret revealed under pressure or a confession dragged out of the dark. It was a single, honest, 5-word answer to a Family Feud survey question, spoken in a voice so quiet that the boom microphone had to strain to catch it. And when those 5 words landed in the studio, they did something that no answer in the history of the show had ever done. They made Steve Harvey lose his voice. Not figuratively, not dramatically. The man who had spent over a decade finding the perfect words for every moment stood at his podium, opened his mouth, and nothing came out. For 8 full seconds, the most experienced host on television stared at a woman he had met 45 minutes earlier and could not form a single word. Because he understood, the way only someone who has lived through the wreckage of a broken marriage can understand, that what she had just said could not be followed with a joke, a transition, or a next question. It could only be followed with silence. And in that silence, 25 years of marriage collapsed in front of 200 witnesses who would carry the memory of it for the rest of their lives. If you have ever watched someone tell the truth and felt the ground shift underneath you, subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications. Because what happened after those 8 seconds of silence is a story you will never forget. The Lawson family from Nashville, Tennessee, walked into the Family Feud studio on a warm Monday morning in July 2025. There were 5 of them. Philip Lawson, 54, a senior financial analyst at a healthcare corporation headquartered in downtown Nashville. His wife, Catherine, 52, a former concert violinist who now taught private music lessons from the converted studio above their garage. Their son, Elijah, 27, an architect at a firm in East Nashville. Their daughter, Grace, 23, a graduate student in comparative literature at Vanderbilt. And Catherine's older sister, Helen, 56, a labor and delivery nurse who had driven down from Knoxville because Catherine had asked, and because Helen had never once in 56 years said no to her younger sister. They wore matching sage green shirts. They smiled for the cameras. In the pre-show warm-up, they played along with the producers' icebreaker games and laughed in all the right places. They looked, to every person on that production team, like a close and happy family. And in many ways they were. But the closeness had a shape to it that only the people inside it could see, a shape that curved around a hollow center, around the space where something used to be that was no longer there. Catherine Lawson was the kind of person who could walk into a room and change the temperature of it without saying a word. It was not charisma exactly. It was presence. She carried herself with a stillness that drew people in, the way silence draws you into a cathedral. She had gray-streaked auburn hair that she wore loose, and hands that moved with a precision and grace that came from 30 years of playing the violin. She had started playing at age 6, when her mother enrolled her in a youth orchestra program at a church in Clarksville. By 12, she was first chair in the Tennessee All-State Youth Orchestra. By 17, she had a full scholarship to the Jacobs School of Music at Indiana University, one of the top conservatories in the country. Her professors said she had a rare gift, the ability to make a violin sound not like an instrument being played, but like a voice speaking directly to the part of you that words could not reach. Catherine graduated at 21 and was offered a seat in the second violin section of the Nashville Symphony Orchestra. It was a dream made real. She played with the symphony for 4 seasons, and those 4 years were, by her own account, the most fully alive she had ever felt. She played Beethoven at the Schermerhorn Center. She played Dvorak at outdoor summer concerts where families sat on blankets and children fell asleep to the sound of strings. She played a solo piece at a benefit gala that made the governor's wife cry. Every performance was a conversation between Catherine and something larger than herself, and every time she put the bow to the strings, she felt the world make sense in a way that nothing else could replicate. Then she met Philip Lawson. He was 28, already climbing the corporate ladder at a healthcare firm, and he attended a symphony fundraiser with a client. He saw Catherine during the reception afterward, standing by herself near the bar, holding her violin case the way other women held their purses. He introduced himself. She was charmed by his confidence. He was captivated by her talent. They dated for a year. He proposed on Christmas Eve. She said yes. They married the following October in a small ceremony at her mother's church in Clarksville. Catherine was 26. The shift began almost immediately, not because Philip asked Catherine to stop playing. He never said those words. What he said, repeatedly and in various forms over the first 3 years of their marriage, was that the symphony schedule was complicated. The evening rehearsals conflicted with dinners he wanted to attend. The weekend performances interfered with trips he wanted to take. The touring schedule meant she was away when he needed her at corporate events where spouses were expected to attend. He never issued an ultimatum. He did something more effective. He made her feel that choosing the violin was choosing against him. Every rehearsal became a negotiation. Every performance became a discussion about priorities. And Catherine, who had spent her life being excellent at one thing, found herself in a marriage where that one thing was treated as an inconvenience. She left the symphony when she was 29. She told the conductor she needed to step back for personal reasons. The conductor, a man who had watched her play for 4 years and understood what her talent meant, looked at her for a long time and said, "Catherine, the chair will be here if you come back." She thanked him. She did not come back. The violin went into its case. The case went into the closet of the guest bedroom. And Catherine Lawson became Catherine Lawson the wife, Catherine Lawson the mother, Catherine Lawson the private music teacher who gave lessons to children in the studio above the garage while the Nashville Symphony played on without her, 3 miles away, close enough to hear if the wind was right. She did not resent Philip. That was the part that made it complicated. She loved him. She had chosen him, and the life they built together was, by any reasonable measure, a good life. They had 2 remarkable children. They had a beautiful home. They had financial security and community standing and the quiet comfort of 25 years of shared history. What they did not have, what Catherine had buried so deep that she sometimes forgot it was there, was the sound of the violin. Not the sound of teaching a 12-year-old to hold a bow correctly. The sound of playing. The sound of Catherine Lawson alone on a stage with nothing between her and the audience except the thing she was born to do. Philip, for his part, did not understand what he had taken. He was not a cruel man. He was not intentionally dismissive. He was a man who measured the world in structures, in systems, in outcomes, and the symphony had not fit neatly into the structure of the life he wanted to build. He believed genuinely that Catherine had made a practical choice and that the choice had been the right one. He pointed to their house, their savings account, their children's educations as evidence. He did not understand that Catherine would have traded all of it for 4 more years of Dvorak on a summer evening. He could not understand that because he had never loved anything the way Catherine loved the violin. He loved his career. He loved his family. But he had never felt the thing that Catherine felt when she played, the feeling of being so completely inside a moment that the rest of the world dissolved. He had never lost that feeling, so he could not know what it cost to give it up. The children knew. Elijah the architect had grown up listening to his mother teach lessons through the floor of his bedroom and had always sensed the difference between the way she played for students and the way she played when she thought no one was listening. Late at night, after everyone was in bed, Catherine would sometimes take the violin out of the closet and play alone in the guest bedroom with the door closed. Elijah heard it. The music she played in those private hours was different. It was deeper, more alive. More painful. It was the sound of a woman visiting the version of herself she had left behind. Grace, the literature student, understood it through metaphor. She once wrote in a paper for a class on Victorian women writers that the most devastating form of loss is not the loss of something taken from you, but the loss of something you surrendered voluntarily, because the grief has no target except yourself. Her professor wrote in the margin, "This feels personal." Grace did not respond to the comment. Helen, Catherine's sister, was the only person who said it plainly. She had been saying it for years in the direct, unvarnished way of an older sister who had earned the right to speak without softening. "You gave up the best part of yourself for a man who doesn't even know what he took." Catherine always responded the same way. "He didn't take it, Helen, I put it down." And Helen would shake her head and say, "Same thing, baby, same thing." The morning of the taping, Catherine was quieter than usual. She wore the sage shirt and a pair of small silver earrings that had been a gift from the symphony conductor when she left. She had not worn them in years. Helen noticed and said nothing. Grace noticed and squeezed her mother's hand in the car. Elijah noticed and looked out the window for the rest of the drive. Philip noticed nothing. He was reviewing the fantasy football standings on his phone. The Lawson family was matched against the Reeves family from Louisville, Kentucky. Steve Harvey opened with his standard warmth, working the crowd and introducing both families. When he reached Catherine, he asked what she did. "I teach violin," she said. Steve smiled. "You play violin?" Catherine paused. "I used to play, now I teach." It was a distinction that most people would have missed. Steve did not miss it. He studied her face for a half-second longer than his usual rhythm, then moved on. When he reached Philip, the introduction was smooth and corporate. "Philip Lawson, senior financial analyst, go Titans." Steve nodded, shook his hand, kept moving. The first round went cleanly to the Lawsons. Philip won the face-off and the family played the round without incident. The energy was light. The audience was engaged. Catherine gave a correct answer and smiled when it hit the board. Philip clapped once and said, "Good one, Kath." It was a small moment of warmth, genuine and unforced, and it reminded the people watching that this was a family that had 25 years of real love built into its foundation. Whatever was about to happen did not erase that. It could not. 25 years is too much life to be undone by one afternoon, but it could be revealed. And revelation, as Catherine would soon demonstrate, was a force that no amount of foundation could withstand. The second round introduced the first fault line. Question was, name something a wife gave up for her family. Catherine was at the podium for the face-off. She did not hesitate. She did not strategize. She said, her career. Number one answer, 44 points. The audience applauded. It was a common answer, a universal answer, and it landed with the weight of shared experience. Half the women in the audience were nodding. Catherine stepped back from the podium with an expression that was composed but taut, like a string tuned a half-step too high. The Lawson family played the round. Answers came. Her free time, her body, her sleep, each one landing on the board, each one a small monument to the things women surrendered in the architecture of family life. Philip gave an answer during the round. He said, her hobbies. It was technically correct. Number 5 on the board, 12 points. But the word hobbies landed differently in a family where one member had given up a seat in a professional symphony orchestra. Helen, standing at the far end of the podium, closed her eyes briefly. Elijah looked at the floor. Grace watched her father's face for any sign that he understood what he had just said. There was none. Philip returned to the podium satisfied with his answer. He did not see what everyone else in his family saw, that calling Catherine's career a hobby was not a wrong answer on the board. It was a wrong answer in life. The third round was the round that changed everything. The question arrived with the force of something that had been waiting a very long time to be asked. Name something you wish you could go back and do differently. The Lawsons were playing the round. Answers came from the family. Elijah said, spend more time with my grandparents. Correct. Grace said, worry less about what people think. Correct. Philip said, invest earlier. Correct, barely. Number 6 on the board. The audience laughed lightly. It was a Philip answer, practical, numerical, and completely missing the emotional register of the question. Then it was Catherine's turn. One answer remained on the board. Catherine walked to the podium. She placed her hands on the surface. She looked at the board, then at Steve, and then almost involuntarily she looked at her husband. It was a look that carried 25 years of love and 23 years of grief compressed into a single glance. She turned back to Steve. The studio was quiet. Not game show quiet, church quiet, the kind of quiet that settles over a room when people sense that something true is about to be spoken. Catherine said in a voice so soft the microphone had to work to capture it, I wish I never stopped playing. 5 words that contained the entire story of her life. The scholarship, the conservatory, the symphony, the 4 years of Beethoven and Dvorak and the sound of a voice that spoke through strings, the Christmas Eve proposal, the slow erosion. The violin in the closet of the guest bedroom, the late-night sessions with the door closed, the 23 years of teaching other people to do the thing she had been born to do. 5 words that were not about a survey at all. They were about everything she had surrendered and everything she had never said. The board revealed the answer. Number 1, 47 points. The highest single answer of the entire episode. But nobody in the studio was looking at the board. They were looking at Catherine. And they were looking at Steve Harvey. Steve stood at his podium. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He closed it. He opened it again. Still nothing. For 8 seconds, Steve Harvey was silent, not pausing for dramatic effect, not building tension. Silent. The kind of silent that happens when a person hears something that bypasses the professional part of their brain and hits the human part directly. Steve had been married 3 times. He had lived through the wreckage of relationships that failed because people could not say what they meant. He had spent years on television helping families laugh through their awkwardness and their pain. But he had never, in over a decade of hosting, heard 5 words that contained so much loss spoken with so much grace. He was not speechless because he did not know what to say. He was speechless because everything he could say felt inadequate. The audience sat in the same silence. 200 people processing the same 5 words and arriving at the same understanding. This was not a game show answer. This was a eulogy. A eulogy for a career, for a gift, for the version of Catherine that had existed before she put the violin in the closet and closed the door. And then every eye in the studio moved to Philip. Philip Lawson stood at the family podium. His face was blank, not the practiced blankness of a man concealing his emotions. The genuine blankness of a man who had just been confronted with something he did not possess the framework to process. He was looking at Catherine. She was looking at the floor. The children stood between them like witnesses at a scene they had been watching unfold their entire lives and had only now been given permission to acknowledge. Helen had her arm around Grace. Elijah was standing perfectly still with his hands in his pockets and his jaw locked. Miss Alma was not on this stage. There was no grandmother to bridge the gap. There was only the gap itself, 23 years wide, filled with silence and the ghost of a sound that had not been heard in this family in a generation. Philip said almost to himself, "Playing? You mean the violin?" The question was so small, so bewildered, so completely devoid of understanding that it functioned as its own kind of devastation. He did not know. After 25 years of marriage, he genuinely did not know that giving up the violin was the defining loss of his wife's life. He thought it was a hobby she had outgrown. He thought it was a chapter she had closed voluntarily and moved past. He did not know about the late-night sessions in the guest bedroom. He did not know about the conductor's earrings she had put on this morning. He did not know that every time she taught a student to play a piece she had once performed on stage, a small part of her grieved all over again. He did not know any of it. And the fact that he did not know after 25 years was the most devastating revelation of all, because it meant that Catherine had not just given up her music. She had given up being known. Steve Harvey found his voice. It took him 8 seconds, but he found it. And when he spoke, it was not the voice of a game show host. It was the voice of a man who had just witnessed something that demanded to be treated with the care it deserved. "We're going to take a moment," Steve said. He did not look at the production team. He did not ask permission. He simply decided, the way he had decided 100 times before on this stage, that the human moment was more important than the television moment. He walked to Catherine. He stood in front of her and waited until she looked up. When she did, her eyes were wet, but her tears had not fallen. She was holding them the way she held everything, with control, with discipline, with the quiet mastery of a woman who had spent her life turning raw emotion into something structured and beautiful. Steve said softly, "Catherine, tell me about the violin." It was not a game show question. It was an invitation. And Catherine, who had not been invited to talk about the violin in 23 years, accepted it. "I was first chair," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the studio was so quiet that every word carried. "I played with the Nashville Symphony for 4 seasons. I played Beethoven. I played Dvorak. I played a solo at a gala once that made someone cry, and it was the proudest moment of my life." She paused. "I stopped when I was 29. My husband's career was growing, and my schedule didn't fit. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I'd go back." Another pause, longer this time. "I never went back. The violin has been in the closet for 23 years. I take it out at night sometimes when everyone is asleep. I play in the guest bedroom with the door closed so no one hears." Her voice caught. "Because if I play it in front of anyone, I'll have to admit that I miss it. And if I admit that I miss it, I'll have to admit that I lost it. And I don't know how to grieve something that I gave away." The studio was weeping, not scattered tears. The entire room, 200 people crying silently while a woman who had never told this story to anyone told it to everyone. Helen had both hands over her mouth. Grace was leaning against Elijah, who had tears running freely down his face. Philip stood at the podium with his hands gripping the edge and his face showing something that the audience had not seen all day. Pain, real, unfiltered, dawning pain. The pain of a man who had just heard his wife describe a grief he had caused without knowing he had caused it. Steve wiped his eyes. He did not try to hide it. "Catherine," he said, "I've been on this stage for a long time. I've heard a lot of answers. But I have never in my entire career heard anyone say something as honest as what you just said, and I need to tell you something." He took a breath. "You did not lose the violin. It's still in your closet. Your gift did not go anywhere. You hear that music in your head right now, don't you?" Catherine nodded almost involuntarily. "Then it's not gone. It's waiting. The same way it waited for you when you were 6 years old and picked it up for the first time. It's waiting because a gift like yours doesn't expire. It doesn't have a shelf life. It just waits for you to come back to it." He turned to face Philip. His voice shifted, not harsh, not accusatory, but direct. "Philip, I'm going to talk to you the way I'd want someone to talk to me. You have been married to this woman for 25 years. She gave up a seat in a professional symphony orchestra. She gave up the thing that made her feel the most alive. And she did it because she loved you and she wanted to build a life with you. That is the biggest sacrifice anyone has ever made for you. And you called it a hobby." Philip flinched. Steve continued. "I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm saying it because you need to hear it. Your wife has been grieving in silence for 23 years and you didn't know. That doesn't make you a bad man, but it makes you a man who stopped paying attention to the most important person in his life. And I think you know that." "I think you knew it the second she said those 5 words. Philip's face collapsed, not gradually, all at once. The professional composure, the financial analyst's control, the 25 years of structured, systematic confidence crumbled in a single moment. His eyes filled. His chin dropped. And then he did something that the audience was not expecting. He turned to Catherine and said in a voice broken beyond repair, "I didn't know. Kath, I didn't know it hurt this much. I thought you were okay. I thought you moved on. I didn't know you were playing alone in the dark." Catherine looked at him. For a long, suspended moment, she said nothing. Then she said, "I know you didn't know, Philip. That's the part that hurts the most." It was the most devastating sentence anyone in that studio had ever heard. Not anger, not accusation, just the quiet, annihilating sadness of a woman whose grief had been invisible to the person who shared her bed for 25 years. The audience was destroyed. People were sobbing openly. Helen was holding Grace, who was shaking. Elijah had turned away, his hand over his eyes. Steve let the moment be. He did not fill it with words. He let the weight of it sit in the room because it needed to sit, because some truths need space before anything else can follow them. And then, after what felt like a very long time, he said, gently, "We have a game to finish, but I want to say one more thing." He looked at both of them. 25 years is not destroyed by one answer. 25 years is a foundation. What happened today is not the end of something. It's the beginning of a conversation that should have started 23 years ago. And the fact that it started here on this stage in front of all of us means that it started. That's what matters. It started. The audience responded with an ovation that was not celebratory. It was supportive. It was 200 people saying, without words, "We are with you." The game resumed. The Lawsons had qualified for fast money. Elijah went first. He was emotional, his voice unsteady, but he pushed through and scored 121 points. Then Catherine walked to the podium. The audience fell completely silent. Steve stood beside her. "Whenever you're ready." Catherine closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was something in them that had not been there all day. Clarity. The fierce, unmistakable clarity of a woman who had finally said the thing she had been holding for 23 years and was now free to be fully present in a way she had not been in decades. Steve began. "Name something that makes you feel alive." "Music," Catherine said instantly. "Name something you would tell your teenage self. Don't let go. Name something people hide from the people they love. How much they're hurting. Name something every woman deserves. To be heard. Name something you want to do before you die." Catherine paused. 1 second. 2. Then she said with a smile that broke and healed simultaneously, "Play one more time." The board revealed the answers. "Music for something that makes you feel alive." Number 1 answer, 42 points. The audience began to build. "Don't let go for something you'd tell your teenage self." Number 1 answer, 34 points. Steve closed his eyes. "How much they're hurting for something people hide." Number 1 answer. 31 points, 3 in a row. The studio was buzzing with electricity. "To be heard for something every woman deserves." Number 1 answer, 29 points. 4 consecutive number 1 answers. The audience was on its feet. Steve was pacing, his hand on his forehead. "One more. Play one more time for something you want to do before you die." He turned to the board. The answer lit up. Number 1, 36 points. Perfect score, 172 points. Combined with Elijah's 121, the Lawson family had 293 points and the $20,000 prize. The studio erupted with an emotional force that shook the overhead lights. Elijah and Grace rushed out and wrapped their mother in an embrace so tight that all three of them swayed. Helen joined them, her arms around her sister, her face pressed against Catherine's hair, whispering something that only Catherine could hear. The audience was standing, weeping, applauding with a ferocity that the crew said they could feel in their chests. Philip stood apart. He did not move toward the group immediately. He watched them, his family, holding each other without him, and on his face was the expression of a man seeing the cost of his obliviousness rendered in real time. The gap between him and his wife was not 5 feet. It was 23 years. Then Catherine looked at him. She did not reach for him. She did not call him over. She simply looked at him, the way she had looked at him across a reception hall when she was 25, and holding a violin case and he was 28, and holding a glass of champagne, and neither of them knew what the next 25 years would cost. And Philip walked to her. Slowly, not with confidence, with humility. The walk of a man who understood that he was not entitled to be included in this moment, but was asking, with his body and his tears, to be allowed back in. Catherine did not embrace him. She took his hand. She held it the way you hold something fragile, and she said, "We need to talk, Philip, really talk, for the first time in a very long time." Philip nodded. "I know," he said. "I should have been listening a long time ago." It was not resolution, it was not forgiveness. It was a door, cracked open the smallest possible amount with light showing through. Backstage, Steve Harvey sat with Catherine for over 20 minutes. He told her that her 5 words and the story she told afterward were the most powerful thing he had ever witnessed on his stage. He told her that he had been married 3 times, and that each failure had taught him something about paying attention, and that what happened with Catherine and Philip was a lesson he wished he had learned earlier in his own life. Catherine thanked him and said something Steve repeated in every subsequent interview about the episode. She said, "Mr. Harvey, I did not plan to say any of that. The game asked me what I wished I could do differently, and for the first time in 23 years, I answered honestly instead of carefully. That is the difference between those 2 words, and it took a game show to teach me that the difference matters. Steve also spoke with Helen. He told her that watching her hold her sister on that stage was something he would carry with him. Helen looked at him and said, "Mr. Harvey, I have been holding my sister since she was 11 years old and our father left. I have been holding her through school, through her career, through her marriage, and through the loss of the thing that made her special. I am tired of being the only one holding her. That man needs to learn how to hold her too." Steve said it was the most direct and necessary thing anyone had said to him in years. Helen said, "I'm a labor and delivery nurse. Direct is all I know." The episode aired 6 weeks later. The response was not just viral, it was historic. Catherine's 5 words, "I wish I never stopped playing," became one of the most searched phrases on the internet for 3 consecutive days. The 8-second clip of Steve Harvey's silence was viewed over 90 million times in its first week. It was analyzed by media commentators, psychologists, communication experts, and cultural critics. A professor of media studies at NYU wrote that it was the most eloquent use of silence in the history of broadcast television. But it was the full unbroken sequence: Catherine's answer, Steve's silence, Catherine's story about playing in the guest bedroom, Steve's speech, and Philip's "I didn't know" that became the defining clip. It was viewed over 200 million times and was translated into 34 languages. It became the most watched piece of content ever produced by the Family Feud franchise across all platforms and all eras. The hashtag #NeverStopPlaying trended worldwide for 12 consecutive days. It was adopted not just by musicians, but by anyone who had set aside a passion, a talent, a dream for the practical demands of life. Former dancers posted videos of themselves dancing in their kitchens for the first time in decades. Writers who had stopped writing posted photos of notebooks being reopened. Painters who had put away their brushes posted images of fresh canvases. A retired surgeon in Japan who had given up competitive piano posted a video of himself playing Chopin at 71. The video was viewed 30 million times. Every post, every video, every story traced itself back to the same source: a woman on a game show stage who had told the truth about the cost of giving up the thing that made her feel alive. The Nashville Symphony Orchestra responded to the episode in a way that nobody anticipated. The current music director, upon seeing the clip, reached out to Catherine through the show's producers. He invited her to return to the Schermerhorn Symphony Center, not as a full-time member, but as a guest performer for a single concert. The piece they chose was Dvorak's New World Symphony, the same piece Catherine had played during her final season with the orchestra 23 years earlier. Catherine said yes. The concert took place 4 months after the episode aired, on a Saturday evening in November. The Schermerhorn Center was sold out. Over 1,800 people filled the hall, including hundreds who had bought tickets specifically because they had seen Catherine's episode. Steve Harvey flew in from Atlanta. Helen drove down from Knoxville. Elijah and Grace sat in the front row. Philip sat beside them. Catherine walked onto the stage wearing a simple black dress and the conductor's earrings. She sat in the second violin section, the same chair she had occupied 23 years earlier. She picked up her bow. She placed it on the strings, and when the first notes of the Dvorak filled the hall, Catherine Lawson closed her eyes and played. She played the way she had played in the guest bedroom at midnight, with the door closed and no one listening. Except now, 1,800 people were listening. Her children were listening. Her sister was listening. Steve Harvey was listening. And Philip was listening for the first time to the sound of the thing his wife had given up for him. The sound that had been living inside their house for 23 years, muffled behind a closed door, and that he had never once thought to open. When the symphony ended, the audience gave a standing ovation that lasted over 4 minutes. Catherine stood with the orchestra, her violin at her side, and she wept openly, not with sadness, with something beyond sadness and beyond joy. With the overwhelming, full-body release of a woman who had finally, after 23 years, been reunited with the most essential part of herself. Steve Harvey, sitting in the 5th row, was crying so hard that the man sitting next to him offered him a handkerchief. Helen was holding Grace's hand with a grip that left marks. Elijah sat with his eyes closed, listening to the echo of the last note as it faded from the hall. And Philip sat in his chair with tears running down his face and his hands pressed together in his lap, and he finally understood. He understood what the violin was. He understood what Catherine had given up. He understood what "I wish I never stopped playing" really meant. And the understanding, arriving 23 years too late, was the beginning of everything that came after. Catherine and Philip entered couples therapy the following week. The work was long and difficult, and did not always move in a straight line. There were sessions where Catherine wept with a grief that surprised even her, grief that had been stored for so long it came out in waves that took her breath away. There were sessions where Philip sat in silence, not the avoidant silence of the last 3 years, but the overwhelmed silence of a man learning for the first time how much pain his obliviousness had caused. The therapist told them both that the path forward was not about assigning blame. It was about rebuilding the ability to see each other, truly see each other, after decades of living side by side while looking in different directions. Harvey invited the Lawson family back for a follow-up segment 10 months after the original episode. When Catherine walked onto the stage carrying her violin case, the audience's response was unlike anything the crew had ever recorded. The standing ovation lasted over 3 minutes. People were crying before she had said a word. Catherine wore a deep burgundy dress. She looked different, not older or younger, lighter, like a woman who had been carrying a weight so long that she had forgotten what her own body felt like without it and who was still getting used to the sensation of standing at her full height. During the segment, Catherine shared the updates, the therapy, the Dvorak concert. The fact that she had accepted a recurring guest position with the Nashville Symphony, performing 6 concerts per season. She shared that she had also started a program called Second Movement, a foundation that provided instruments, lessons, and performance opportunities to adult musicians who had given up their practice due to life circumstances. The program had launched with $1.5 million in donations inspired by her episode and had already placed instruments in the hands of over 400 adults across the country. Catherine said, "Every one of those people is me. Every one of them put something down that they loved because life told them they had to. This program tells them they can pick it back up." Philip spoke during the segment for the first time publicly since the episode. His voice was quiet and raw. "I spent 25 years married to the most talented person I have ever known, and I called her talent a hobby. I turned her music into an inconvenience. I did not do it out of cruelty. I did it out of blindness. And the worst part is that she never told me how much it hurt because she loved me enough to carry it alone." He paused. "I cannot give her back 23 years. I cannot undo the silence. But I can tell her right here, right now, what I should have said a long time ago." He turned to Catherine. "Kath, I hear you now. I hear the music. I hear the silence that came before it. And I will spend whatever years I have left making sure you never have to play behind a closed door again." Catherine reached for his hand. The audience wept. Steve revealed during the segment that Catherine's episode had inspired what he called the most meaningful initiative of his career. Family Feud, in partnership with the National Endowment for the Arts, had established The Unfinished Song, a national grant program funding creative re-entry for adults who had abandoned artistic careers. The program provided fellowships, studio space, mentorship, and performance opportunities. It launched with $6 million in commitments. Steve said, "Catherine Lawson reminded the world that talent does not expire and that dreams do not die just because we stop feeding them. This program exists because of her. And every musician, every artist, every dancer, every writer who finds their way back through this program is part of the conversation that started on this stage with 5 honest words." The children continued to carry the story in their own lives. Elijah, the architect, designed the performance space for one of the first, Second Movement regional centers, a concert hall in Nashville built specifically for adult musicians returning to performance. He donated his design services. He told his mother it was the most important building he would ever draw. Grace published an essay in a literary magazine titled The Guest Bedroom, about the experience of growing up in a house where her mother played in secret. The essay was read by over 6 million people and was adapted into a short film that premiered at a documentary festival. In the essay's final line, Grace wrote, "My mother did not lose the violin. She hid it, not from the world. From the person she became, so the person she was could survive. And on a game show stage, the person she was came out of hiding and played one perfect round that sounded like 23 years of everything she never said." Catherine Lawson still teaches violin from the studio above her garage. She still works with students who are just beginning their musical journey, and she is still the patient, exacting, deeply caring teacher she has been for over 2 decades. But now, 6 times a year, she puts on a black dress and the conductor's earrings, and she walks onto the stage of the Schermerhorn Symphony Center and she plays. Not in a guest bedroom with the door closed. On a stage under lights with 1,800 people listening. And every time she places the bow on the strings, she feels the thing she felt when she was 21 and the world made sense in a way that nothing else could replicate. The feeling did not go away. It was waiting. Just like Steve Harvey said it would be. On the wall of Catherine's teaching studio, next to photos of her students and a framed program from the Dvorak concert, there is a small handwritten card. It was given to her by the original symphony conductor, the man who had told her the chair would be waiting. He had watched her episode from his retirement home in Brentwood and had mailed the card the next day. It reads in slightly shaky handwriting, "I told you the chair would be here. Welcome home, Catherine." She looks at it before every lesson. And sometimes, when the last student of the day has gone and the studio is empty and the afternoon light comes through the window at just the right angle, Catherine takes out her violin and she plays, not behind a closed door, in the open, with the windows up. And the neighbors, who have heard the sound of student scales and practice pieces for years, stop what they are doing and listen. Because the sound coming from that studio is different now. It is deeper. It is richer. It is the sound of a woman who lost herself for 23 years and found her way back. And it is, by any measure, the most beautiful thing on the street. If this story changed something in you, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this. Share this with someone who put something down a long time ago and needs to hear that it is not too late to pick it back up. Share it with someone who is playing behind a closed door and needs permission to open it. And remember, your gift does not expire. Your talent does not have a shelf life. It is waiting for you the same way it has always waited, and all you have to do is sit down and play.